right, welcome to the meeting of the Hingham Municipal Light Plant Board, August 13th, 2024. This meeting is being held remotely as an alternate means of public access pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023 and all other applicable laws, temporarily amending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You're hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of the meeting in accordance with Mass General Law Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. Is there anybody else who wishes to record the meeting today other than the light plant? Okay, great. Well, welcome. The big event today is our meeting with Energy New England, who is here to tell us about our power supply overview of the moment. We have Ken Standler and Lori Heffron to fill us in. So do we need any introduction, or shall we just dive in?
I think we just dive in, Laura.
Okay. Take it away.
All right.
Oh, wait, let me first say, if you're going to share the screen, let me just say, at the moment, there is nobody on the call except staff and board.
Okay.
If I probably can't, if you share a screen, I can't see everybody. So I'm just going to invite staff and board to jump in if you have questions, because I may not.
Right, that's fine. I mean, everyone should have a copy of the presentation, right, that Lori put together.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, really breaking it down in small bits and pieces. Real quick update on projects, what we're talking about. Quick overview of the market, what's out there, what we're expecting for this upcoming winter. Then Lori, I'm going to throw it over to Lori. She'll talk about the hedge position, and go into greater detail about historical, how the adjusted net interchange analysis has come out, and then you'll throw it back to me real quick. Relating back to the greenhouse gas emission standards that is now 6 years away from coming into play. So that's the agenda. Real quickly on project updates. The big thing here is, we stopped negotiating with Avangrid about some onshore wind projects. They kept on changing the price every time I ended up talking to them. And what started out as a very good deal turned out to be a marginal deal at best. They basically restructured the things such that during the early part of the contract, which was 25 through 29, they were keeping a majority of the environmental attributes. And then for 2030 through 2034, the munis were getting 100%. One of the reasons why we stopped is that the adjusted value of that contract was now above $90 per megawatt hour. And if you take a look at the risk associated with a wind project that would be approaching 25 years come the end of the contract, I just felt that, we were giving up way too much in the front and not getting enough on the back end of things. So that's why we kind of pushed that away. Other key things that we're talking about now, we've been talking with Brookfield about 2 other hydro facilities. It's a good price.
And can I ask you, do you want to put this, I know this list is in the presentation. Do you want to put it on the screen?
I can share if you want. If you want me to share.
I mean, we might be able to follow it there.
Yeah, I'll share it and see what.
Oh, okay, I thought everyone had the slide deck in front of them.
Well, the board does, but for the public, it's better to put it on.
All right. Okay, just go to slide, let's see, 2 or 3. There we go. I'll just quickly touch on a few things. Brookfield, we're talking about 15-year term. It's a hydro deal. And I'll talk a little bit later about where you sit as far as a light plant, as far as meeting GGS. talking with First Light about a blend and extend on the Cabot Turner deal.
Sorry, what does that
and
mean? Blend and extend?
what's that?
What does that mean? Blend?
Oh,
and
okay, I'm sorry. Basically, that means we come up with a new price that will allow us to price out through 2040. Because the price in the current Cabot Turner Falls is below the current market. What ended up happening is that we end up paying a little bit more in the front, we get more benefit in the back end. So you basically, we're trying to get to a point that we get an average price for power plus environmental attributes that comes in slightly below $60 per megawatt hour. And that will run out through 2040.
And
The
that's
other
our
thing,
biggest, we have about 10% of our power supply comes through that contact.
no, it's only about 4% of your portfolio, I believe.
Okay, I'm looking at 2023, so I got out of date numbers here. Go on.
And the last thing would be, we're finalizing the Granite Wind contract with NextEra, which is really the replacement of the Chariot Solar. We finally finalized the negative pricing concerns. And that should be coming out to everyone probably in the next couple of weeks, probably in the next week.
And what were the negative pricing concerns?
Basically, with wind, our concern is that during certain times of the day, when there is an excess of intermittent resources, meaning resources that are not typically damped down or dampened down, that you could see prices go below zero. And that's what we're trying to, we don't want to be, we'd like not to be running a unit at a negative price and paying paying a price of $70 and then having to pay to sell it back to the ISO.
And
So
how do you resolve something like that?
Well, we basically have it structured such that there is a cap on the lower price, such that if prices fall below, I think it's like negative $40, they turn the unit off.
Okay. And I'm asking a lot of questions, but let me invite the board and the staff to just jump in if you have questions, because I can't necessarily see you on the screen. Tyler, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I have some questions on general contracting.
Yeah.
So I'd say for the next 5 years or so, and probably beyond as well, the peak power in New England is in the 60s. And so I'd like to know what kind of valuations we run relative to the forward curves, and how do we compare those in our contracting? Like, I would never expect to buy as produced wind for greater than the peak power price, and in fact, it should be well below the peak power price, more like an off-peak price or even below, because of the unit contingent nature of it, as well as the congestion risk.
Right,
so when I'm hearing these prices of like $90, it has my just some yellow flags up. Like, how does any price like that make sense?
okay, so there's several components that go into it, and besides just the energy, which you're quoting at $60, there's the environmental attribute associated with it. So you have the class 1 rec that goes with it. That the long-term price for that, depending on how long the contract goes, is anywhere from $30 to $36 per megawatt hour. So if you take your $60 and you add 36, you're now at $96 for a valuation. What we take a look at is if there is no historical data, we take what is known as a probability 50 data that the developers come up with based on winds, for a wind play for a wind farm. It's based on they're running meteorological data through models to determine whether this is a good place for a wind turbine. So they do that, and it comes up with a probability 50 type of curve. And we run that through some historical data to come up with relationships to the on-peak and off-peak prices. On top of that, if there is not a specific bus that is, typically there's a bus that's pretty close to it. So we also evaluate the prices at that the generation bus versus the mass hub to get sort of the basis differential. So all those factors go into building the model to determine what is a fair market value for this project. We have models, or we have projections on what we think the forward curve is going to look at. We also reach out to other trading companies to see where their forward curve is looking. We kind of see whether or not our forward curve falls in line with the other counterparties. And so we might make an adjustment on our forward curve relative to what the rest of the market is showing. And that's basically how we come up with the price. And on top of that, we'll put in the value of the environmental attribute for a main class 2 rec, which is typically the hydro facilities, where you've been using between $3 and $4 per megawatt hour on top of it. Right now, and I'll talk about it a little bit at the end, and maybe we'll talk about it now, there's a alternative compliance cap payment in Maine that caps it at $5 on a regulatory basis. On a legislative basis, they could actually raise it up to $10. So we're right now using $5 or $4 for our valuation, saying about 80% of the cap is what we're going to see long term. Does that answer the question, Tyler?
Yeah, that helps out a lot. I have a follow-up, I guess, is when we're looking at contracting, are we, when I sort of quoted the price that power is trading at right now, that's for firm power. And I'm assuming that when we're contracting for as produced, we're getting a discount to the firm prices. Is that correct?
We typically take, I don't know necessarily know that we get a firm, noticeable discount. But what we're using is that historical data to come up with a valuation of what that curve looks like relative to the forward curve. Okay, so you might see more, power on the off-peak hours, and so you get a lower price versus the on-peak power. When we talk to, wind developers, it's different than solar developers versus hydro developers, because wind is a lot more uncertain than a hydro facility. A hydro facility, you've got a fairly good handle during a normal hydro season what that shape is going to look like. Now, during a poor hydro season, the shape's going to look fairly similar. It's just going to be less volume. And with solar, you're going to get a fairly consistent shape, and you don't have control over the cloud as much. But we try to make some sort of assessment as far as the intermittency of that resource. Whether or not we get the full value of that intermittency, I don't know. It's hard to tell. But that is taken into account when we come up with the pricing, or when we come up with what we think is a fair market value price.
Right. And included in that intermittency is some expectation of some sort of forced outage rate or maintenance and things like that as well, or no?
Yeah, I mean, the forced outage rate, I don't particularly see that we hold that into play as much, because I think that how do you account for that and figure out, I mean, the forced outage rate is during a low price season, so I don't think we take into specifically spelling that out as in evaluating the type of deals.
Gotcha. I guess my last question would be, with respect to the engineering studies that you were referencing, the P50 scenarios for the
Yep.
wind expectations, do those engineering studies come from the developer or do they come from a third party that actually does that?
Typically, it comes from a third party that does it for the developer.
Yep. All right. No, thanks for fielding that bunch of questions. I appreciate it.
No problem, Tyler. All right.
Great.
I think
Carry on.
that pretty much covers the project updates. Diving into the next slide is really, I mean, I know that we've gone over this in the last 3 years. The natural gas basically drives the New England power market, especially during the winter time. It's still represents the lion's share of the generation year round. And on cold days, we're going to really max out the gas-fired generation and then the oil-fired generation on top of that to meet peak load. But when we max out the gas-fired generation, we're typically maxing out the ability to put gas through the through the pipeline through the normal in the normal direction, which is basically from the south and west in through up to Boston. So really what we rely heavily on those cold days is LNG. So right now, you know, as we look around across Europe, you know, Europe's sitting at about 87% full on their LNG capacity, with the forecast of being somewhere between 98 and 99% full once we get through the fill season, which is the end of October. So really the demand for incremental LNG into Europe is really not going to be driving the market as it did a couple of winters ago when they were struggling to replace the curtailment from Russia. And right now we're looking at winter LNG prices somewhere around $15 in the EU. So it's roughly netting back to roughly on a comparable basis around $14 per MMBtu for New England gas. And that kind of is what's driving up the winter prices in New England to roughly around $130 for on-peak power for January and February. On the US side, we came out of this past winter with fairly strong inventory levels, and we've continued to maintain that strength. We're still looking at roughly hitting about 4 TCF in storage heading into the winter season.
Can you tell me what a TCF is?
Trillion cubic feet.
Thank you.
Okay. What that means is that we're starting to see some, not weakness, but I think softer Henry Hub prices. And that might be offset by production companies trying to curtail the production to keep prices a little bit firmer.
I need
some
to
success early.
Ken.
What's that?
I need to ask a question here. I need to apologize in advance. I went over all your materials and I found that there were quite a number of acronyms and even concepts that I'm not familiar with. I know Tyler is, and perhaps Mike is deeper into it than I am. So I may have to ask you.
So what are
what is the Henry Hub?
Henry Hub? Okay. Laura, come on. We've gone through this like 3 years in a row. Henry Hub is a centralized location in Louisiana that is the primary pricing point for natural gas on the New York Mercantile Exchange.
Thank you for reminding me.
Okay. I'm sorry about the acronyms. Being in this industry for 40 some odd years, it's kind of second nature, and I try to have Lori slap me across the head a few times when I come up with these things. EU, European Union.
I'll let you know if something goes by that
Okay.
I don't,
All right.
don't remember what it is.
So where am I?
I'm sorry, I
Yes.
interrupted you explaining where the Henry Hub was.
So, I mean, Henry Hub, I
next
mean,
year.
it's right now, it's a battle between natural gas production and natural gas prices. With prices now down around $2.20. There's increased conversations about production companies cutting back on their production. And that, sorry about using repetitive things there. And that could cause the Henry Hub prices to increase as we head into the fall, if they are successful in reducing the amount of MMBtus that they put into the marketplace. All right, you can probably skip ahead a couple of slides there, Tom. All right. Yeah, I mean, here is just a couple of slides, the next two slides, kind of like when we look at the marketplace and we're going out to market, how we look at, is this a good time to buy? What is the current trends in the market? And it represents, we take a look at the last 365 days, and then we narrow, then the thicker box represents the last 30 days. So you can see kind of like where we are over the past year and where we are relative to the past 30 days to see whether or not prices are stronger, prices are weaker. The other thing you can notice is that most of the price volatility, I mean, most of the price movement is in January and February. Those are where the largest bars represent. The rest of the year, it's a fairly tight window of $10 to $15 that prices might move. So really what we're looking at is when we look at the volatilities, what are we seeing in December, January, and February as far as what's driving the overall market? Next slide has to do with natural gas. And this has to do with the Henry Hub prices, which have less to do with what prices are up in New England. As you can see, we've talked about prices are low, and you can see where we stand relative to the last 365 days, last 30 days. We're all trending down towards the bottom of that curve. But on the power side, you saw that we're trending towards the top side of the curves during the winter time. So what is driving that? And that is really the delivered cost of gas, or the basis between the Henry Hub and Algonquin City Gate, which is Algonquin is the primary pipeline in one of the primary pipelines in New England. And the Algonquin price is very tightly tied to what the price of LNG is in Europe. And so that's why you see the huge spread in prices. All right. Next slide.
Is it tightly tied to the price in Europe for LNG? Because if the price is better there, all the LNG is going there and it raises.
Correct. LNG now has become much more of a global marketplace. And, we are competing for, LNG with Europe, with Asia. We really can't compete for the LNG that's being produced in the US because there's no US flagged LNG ships that could bring LNG from Louisiana up to New England. So we have to compete with Trinidad and Africa as the LNG sources into New England.
Question there. Is there any current political talk about repealing the Jones Act to make that possible?
No.
He's laughing.
Yeah, I say, yeah.
There have been people who have talked about it, but they get squashed as soon as they mention it because it's not critical.
It's critical for us in New England, but just for nobody else.
But it's just us. And unfortunately, you have people in New England legislators in New England are just not as aggressive as far as fossil fuels, and LNG is a fossil fuel to be brought into New England. That's just the bottom line. You know, I'm not sure Elizabeth Warren or Markey or the Connecticut delegation or anyone else will be, you know, banging the drum to bring LNG into New England.
That's too bad.
Yes, it is.
They don't, are they lacking the awareness that we actually need it to heat our homes? That's
think
hard for
they
me to
are.
picture. Really?
And I think they also lack the awareness that in lieu of it coming from Texas, it comes from Europe, the Middle East, and Russia.
Yep. Whether they lack the awareness or it's not high on their priority list, Tyler.
Mhm.
I don't know which way it goes. All right. This next slide, you know, again, okay, Lori changed days to, it looks like hours, right?
Yeah, the frequency distribution of the pricing should say hours,
Um,
so instead of days.
She went more granular than I went. So, I mean, you can see that we had very few days or hours that were really high priced during last winter. You know, we had, you know, I think 17 hours that were above $200, which is probably those hours that were either relying on oil fire generation or was requiring a lot of LNG to be run through the system. Most of the hours were really less than $80, which meant that normal conditions on the system. What else we have here? I mean, right now, you know, I think it's roughly 100, 105, $110 per megawatt hour around the clock. Now, if you believe the seasonal forecast that's shown to the right, or Farmer's Almanac, the LMP price will average less than $104 this upcoming winter, because it's forecasted to be above normal temperature for New England. Not to say that we won't have days or hours that are above $200, but the likelihood that we'll be averaging probably in the $50 to $80 range is more likely for around the clock.
So
Right.
Ken, just to clarify, the days in the figure are hours or
Yes.
are
Yes.
days?
No, they're hours, the hours during that season.
Is it a typo?
Yes.
Well, no, she changed the numbers to reflect the,
The December 23 through February of 2024, there's only 91 days. So this is looking at hourly LMPs and how many times did that LMP go
Okay,
above a
so-
certain. You know?
So if I interpret this correctly, there were 17 hours in
Correct.
duration where the LMP was greater than, up to $286.39.
That's correct. 17 total hours in the 2,184, I believe, in that whole winter season.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
all right, I'm going to turn now over to Lori, talk about the portfolio and all the interesting things that she has worked on for the last, I don't know, 2 months.
So
Ken,
Tom,
Thanks very
Ken,
much.
Could I just follow up with a couple of questions on
Of course.
we were talking about that engineering P50 value, and it was done by an independent contractor. Do they provide their predictions to more than the developers? Are the ISOs getting those results? How do you independently monitor that their data is good, and do you test it with past performance results, so to speak?
It's kind of hard to compare one location versus another location as far as usage, because it's depending on how they've set it up. But what Marcos does do is he does take a look at the sanity of it to say, okay, typically we see a 30% capacity factor on a wind project.
Right,
Does this P50 data come between 28 and 33% on
sure,
the capacity factor? That's basically what we kind of true up against. And then he also looks on a monthly basis to see during certain months of the year, there's better load factors, making sure that those load factors correspond. So the shape on a monthly basis looks fairly similar to other sites in New England.
okay, so we do internally at Energy New England look at the validation of the data.
Yeah, we can't, I don't think we don't have the expertise to validate the specific data for that location, but we have the expertise to compare that results to other resources in our portfolio to
Okay,
see how they compare to actual data that we have.
right, because you'll get a daily wind forecast for how much a wind farm is expected to produce. And
Right, we
if
get
you,
and we also get the actual production of the last.
exactly, so you can compare what you're predicting to what you get, and you can extrapolate it out over the period of a year and make sure that the farm is doing what it's supposed to be doing within, certain deviations.
Parameters.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right. I mean, we do that, Michael. It's just that we can't validate the mathematics on the meteorological data that
Oh, sure.
these third parties come up with.
Sure. And then my second question is, what do you see for the future of wind procurement? I know the Avant Wind project fell through on economics, but there are other projects that are being talked about. Where does Energy New England stand on that for future wind procurement for our portfolio?
Yeah, we look at everything that comes across our desks with regards to onshore wind and offshore wind. Onshore wind, we've done quite a bit of projects, from Spruce, Saddleback, Canton, Granite, Moscow. And so, we're also running up against how much wind is the right amount of wind to have in your portfolio, right? You don't want to have, I don't think you want to have too much concentration of wind. You want to have a nice diverse portfolio such that, especially where the municipalities have the ability to count nuclear in their portfolio as far as non-emitting, making sure that, wind makes up maybe 15 to 20% at most, so that if it's not a windy day, you're not in a situation where you're losing so many megawatts off your portfolio, and having a certain amount in hydro, having a certain amount in solar to get a nice diversity across, the type of resource. So
On the renewable side, yeah.
yeah. I don't know if did we do that for them as far as what their breakdown is on wind?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do actually.
Yeah.
Um,
This seems like a good moment to ask this question, because since we're talking about the mix in the portfolio, do we ever get an opportunity to buy more nuclear, or is that just all sewn up?
we did buy more nuclear back last year.
Yeah, I noticed that we're at 40% now, and I think we were
Yeah.
at more like
We
25.
are trying to get conversations going with Dominion, who own Millstone, about possibly contracting more with them. Right now, they're kind of, they're talking to Connecticut, because Connecticut had signed a long-term deal with them, and there's certain requirements underneath the Connecticut RPS, or their clean initiatives, that it's taking priority over anything else.
Mhm.
But we have talked to them. We've told them we are interested. We would be interested in somewhere between around 50 megawatts to 75 megawatts of nuclear power for the various municipalities, because I would love to,
Are
you know,
other
right now we've got a
MLPs looking for
lot.
that too?
What's that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, are other MLPs looking for that?
Yes,
I know Concord recently upped its some years ago, like 2 or 3 years ago. They bought, I think they had no nuclear and they bought in somehow.
yeah, there's a few that are off the nuclear trend.
Mhm.
Not many, but you probably can guess which two are in our portfolio of clients.
Well, to me, it just, I feel like, you know, increasing the amount of baseload power that we have in our portfolio could possibly allow us to push a little bit further with some of the renewables and be,
Right.
maybe we wouldn't need to hedge quite as much if we had more baseload power in our portfolio. I'm just guessing. You'll tell me if that makes sense or not.
I don't disagree with you, Laura. I mean, I think that where you're sitting, I think you're what, roughly around 40%
Mhm.
nuclear. That's a good spot to be in.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't
there-
think
is there
you'd
a
want to
reason-
be,
Would there be a reason not to increase that?
In Menlo.
I think to increase it on a where you're, you know, where a majority of your nuclear backing is not on a unit entitlement. That's okay, because now if Seabrook comes down and you don't know how long it's down for, you know, you're kind of like out of luck. And so we kind of like would like to get some diversity to have, you know, Millstone 1 and or 2 and 3 and Seabrook in the mix so that you have some of your risks spread out across the various assets.
Mhm.
But having more than 40%, I think we have people upwards of 50, 55% in their portfolio having nuclear.
I know that.
So I'm not against it, and we will continue to push Dominion for megawatt hours for those municipalities that would like some more.
I learned at the NEPA conference a year ago that Dominion was looking at putting in some of those new smaller package plants in where their old reactors have gone offline. So maybe there'll be more opportunity there. I don't know.
Maybe.
Ken, a question on that vein is, would any of the upstate New York nuclear units be interested in selling power into New England for any reason? If we can't get it from Millstone, let's say.
I'm not sure whether it's a good question, but I'm not sure whether or not they would qualify for the emission-free energy credits. I'm not sure how that would work. We'd have to figure out the specifics behind getting those attributes put through the ISO New England GIS system. Okay, so to get the power, not a problem. Getting the power with the environmental attribute being counted is what we're really shooting for, Michael.
Right. I know that in other instances, the value of the environmental attributes are more valuable in New England than in New York. So there's currently some exporting of those power and renewables going on to New England. So I guess my thought was that maybe that is similar situation.
Yes, and I think the big question, Valerie, is whether or not we can get them transferred and that attribute transferred in. In fact, if you take a look at New York recs for hydro, that is significantly above the main class 2 recs prices. I think it's roughly trading around $21, and main class 2s are at $5. So there has been talk from some producers of hydro of actually moving power out of New England to take advantage of that $15 spread in the rec price.
Okay, any other questions for Ken?
I mean, I guess just to follow up on the SMR reactors, the small modular reactors, do we know if any of those are being looked at, being developed in our region?
I can't answer that question. I don't know that answer.
Okay.
I mean, Seabrook and Milton would be the two places.
Seabrook was looking at Laura alluded to it a little bit, but I was just wondering whether they've moved forward, because it does seem like SMRs are building a bit of a head of steam.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything as far as small. Yeah, I haven't heard anything on that technology.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of the capacity factor of offshore wind, maybe is a little bit more reliable than the onshore wind.
Only if the blades don't fall apart.
Well, that's an unfortunate blip, I understand, but I don't think that's going to stop the train in the long run.
Okay, any more questions for Ken on this part of the presentation? Are there any questions or comments from the public on the presentation so far? Okay, I guess over to you, Lori.
Did I go too far?
Right, this is a chart that Hingham receives in the weekly report. It's typically the last slide, which is based on your forecasted load and the forecast of the resource generation. What I wanted to depict here is your winter position, since that's the most volatility we see in price. And Hingham is well hedged over the next 4 years, which the next couple of slides will break that down a little further in a little bit more detail, so you can see by month. So you can go to the next slide, Tom.
But before you do,
Question.
let me just make sure, let me make sure I understand what we're looking at. The colored areas represent our contracts. And
correct, over on the right. Yep.
Our load.
And the black line is your forecasted load.
Right,
and that's
so that shows us how far we are hedged at
correct.
any given moment. Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Somebody else?
So, yeah, it looks like, I don't know if this is more of a question for Tom and Mark or for E&E, but reading this chart, this is telling me that we're 20 to 26.7% unhedged in the summertime, which is a significant amount, obviously, to be going to the spot market for at one of the most expensive times of the year. And in the wintertime, we're, I call it 12% unhedged, if I'm reading this correctly. And, how are we thinking about short-term contracts, if we consider those, to hedge those exposures ahead of the peak seasons? And how do we make the decision on whether or not it's a good idea to maintain a either large or small unhedged position going into a peak season?
Tom, if you go to the next slide, I think it breaks it down a little bit more clearly. It breaks down all the months where we can see. So you'll see, Tyler, in red. It's also broken out by peak and off peak. So also from that position report, and there's a weekly report, but this is in your position report that we look at, and we keep the load forecasts updated yearly and the generation, and we keep the prices. We continually look at forward prices on a daily basis, or however often we're looking at this chart to see where Hingham is open or exposed. Mm-hmm. So you can see the summer is typically July and August is a little bit higher. But personally, I'd rather be going out for strips of power in July and August versus December, January, February. But I wanted to give you a little bit of history as to where you ended up with June, July, and August for your exposure from the spot market.
Just to be sure I understand, Laura, just be sure I understand what I'm looking at. The percentages in this chart represent a numerical version of the previous chart.
Correct, yes. Yep, they show you how open you are. It gives you the total open position. So it just takes
Mhm.
all of your purchases divided by your total load or forecasted load. And it'll say, here's your remainder, and we do that for each month.
Got
And
it. And what are we considering on peak and off peak here?
so your on peak is typically your 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 5 by 16. So that would be hour ending 8 through hour ending 23, 11 p.m. So it's 16 hours a day is your on peak. The rest, the nights and weekends are typically considered off peak as well as holidays.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Do we
Um,
look at or manage at all sort of the, this is a great chart to look at our exposure because it tells us that we're long in the shoulder months and we're short in the peak periods. Do we have something like this that's similar for on an hourly basis? Are there some hours where we're 50% long or 50% short?
I don't think you'd ever get to
I'm not-
50%, but you can on occasion. It's just a little more, I should say, a lot more difficult to look at it on an hourly. I don't believe we have a position report that shows it hourly. What I tend to do is look at the actuals after the fact, which is the packet that I sent, aside from the slide deck, to give you an idea of when you are, where your positions are, but in the months that you are buying and the months that you're selling, what you're looking at and how your resources performed. It's everything what we would do prior to is obviously based on a forecast. And what Ken alluded to earlier is it's difficult to measure the intermittent contracts and what might happen. And also your load can change. You can increase your load, you can have less than we projected. What I like about the ANI analysis is, as we talked about wind and different seasons and your solar and when your hydro is available, it gives you a better picture of when those resources show up. And even though you may fall short of your load, you still could be buying from the spot at an advantageous price. So you did not get, necessarily hurt in the market. And we look at all that continually. We're looking at prices to say, okay, so I might take this report and I may tweak, depending on what Tom wants to do and what the board wants to do, I may tweak those open percentages, and then that'll give me the amount of megawatt hours, a purchase size that I might want to look at. And based on forward prices, we would get an outlook of what that might cost Hingham. And then you can look at that and say, is this going, like you had mentioned earlier about peak and off-peak prices and where those sit? We take a look at that and say, where's the risk, or do we want to tweak maybe less megawatt hour purchase because we feel on the whole, we don't think the market is going to average this high of a price over this upcoming summer or this upcoming winter. So we kind of crunch those percentage hedged or open, however you want to look at it. And then we're continually looking at the trend in the market prices to see what we think might happen.
So I have a question that's that's very basic. I apologize. We're looking at these forward prices on which we're sort of using to project what we might want to acquire in the future. Who generates these forward prices for us? Who is the estimator of these prices?
That's typically the marketplace. So it's not us. It's not.
Yeah.
It
I mean, does ISO New England generate?
No, it's a ICE, which is International Continental Exchange. The NYMEX, which I miss, basically is ICE. Trading companies, brokers all come up with their numbers, and that's what feeds into these prices.
I see.
In the lower
So
box.
maybe individual generators will project what costs will be.
No,
and
it's not
feed it
typically
into a model?
generators. Not typically generators, typically trading companies.
Uh-huh.
Generators are more concerned with, what their cost of production is. And then using their cost of production and comparing it to what the forward curve is to see whether or not they're actually going to sell into the market or not generate.
Mhm.
I would just add that you could kind of consider these prices to be just like the stock market, and that as of August 7th, the stock market settlement price for June 2025 was $41.90. And that changes every day, and it will change every day. based upon what the market perceives the supply and demand fundamentals of that month to be.
Correct.
Thanks.
The other thing I'd like to look at, Tyler, aside from, because I think it helps in your decision making as to whether or not you think that's the right price or not, is what Hingham's energy cost is currently. You're at typically 4 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour for your overall energy costs. So if I look at a contract and I say, well, we got a price of $65 a megawatt hour, I look at that volume that I'm proposing we purchase, and we build that in and say, okay, what does this do to Hingham's overall cost of energy? How much are we increasing or levelizing or stabilizing that cost? So it's not really just a one look at what the market's doing. I also look at your portfolio and try to add this in and say, what am I going to do to their overall cost of power if we buy this? So we look at a bunch of different scenarios that way just to see the impact of a prospective purchase.
Yeah, thank you. That makes sense.
Slide or?
Yeah, I think it's good.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. If you would. I wanted to try to summarize this, the other packet that I gave you. I looked at it. I know, Tyler, you wanted to see how we were matching up the resources against the load. So these are obviously, that packet I gave you is what actually happened. And in the time frame I've had, all of your resettlements are done. So it should have been your actual load and your actual resources and what they truly generated and what your load, where that landed. So this, I tried to give you for the winters, the term of the analysis, the winter season, and then each of your seasons that you wanted, the year of 2023, and then the winter of the following, this past winter, 23-24. And whether your total megawatt hours from the spot market, this is just what you had to buy or open position where that created. So you bought whatever you bought, and then I put in black, obviously, if you sold to the ISO. In that next column, I just tried to show you of all your purchases, this is the amount you bought from the spot market and what that percentage was out of your total purchase or sale, I should say, too. And then what your net position was, what your purchases were, and then where it ended up dollars per megawatt hour. And if you look at even when you had to purchase, especially the highest purchase price was $69.25 per megawatt hour over the total month, a total season, I should say. And that's a very low price for a winter season. You're only about 13% open over that season. So with that, those prior charts showing you that in the winter, Hingham is 85 to about 94% hedged over these next 4 years. This kind of gives you that picture of how that shows up in monetarily for you and what that's doing. So it's not increasing your overall cost where you're the amount that you're open right now. Hopefully that makes sense. The most you were open was the summer season of 2023 at 23%. And I'm just averaging over those 3 months. So that's kind of a summary of all of those pages I gave on your adjusted net interchange.
Oh, gotcha. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
I think, I think this answers, some of the question that I submitted, and just in general, trying to make sure that we're understanding when we're going to the market, what that market price compares to our contract price, how much imbalance we're having, and just that we're managing it and watching it.
Mhm.
No, it's good. They're good questions, and it's key to understanding your whole portfolio and how it functions. A lot of what's difficult is we're trying to look at Hingham, and we have to also remember what's going on and how the pool is dispatched as a whole. So there's a lot of moving pieces and parts to it that we really have to pluck out. How does Hingham function and the effects of the marketplace? And I think overall doing very well. What I tried to do on the packet of the adjusted net interchange, so you could see, was just some specifics on the days of the week, so that you can see how your load's functioning, and also some temperature data to make it a little bit more meaningful. So hopefully you can see what a warm winter 23 was, 23, 24. So hopefully that is meaningful. But if there's ever any questions as far as if you need me to do a deeper dive on the hour, a day, a week, a month as far as the day ahead market and how that settled out in your real time, and then the net, because there's a lot of pieces for that. That's why it takes a while to put that together, to drill that down to just the net position. So if there's ever anything you'd rather see flushed out, please don't hesitate to either let Tom know or email me, and I can give you the details on a specific point in time.
So
Okay.
one question I have is the potential scenario where one of our nuclear portfolios goes down.
Yep.
And this did happen in each bottom in PJM's RTO this summer. How would that affect our hedging and our potential exposure to high during a heat wave LMPs during any given day or period of outage? That's my concern, that we're potentially benefiting from a lot of inexpensive nuclear power,
right,
but exposing ourselves to the potential risk that that power is not actually available during a cold or a hot period.
What percentage of their portfolio is actual entitlements in nuclear facilities?
40% in total.
No, but no.
Is 35.
No, entitlements versus bilaterals. Because a bilateral really is not tied, even though it's backed by Seabrook or backed by and backed by Seabrook. If it comes down, NextEra still is delivering the power because it's just a bilateral that's providing us the environmental attributes associated with Seabrook.
Okay.
It's only the entitlements that we have through Seabrook and Millstone that are impacted.
So is that a much smaller percentage, Ken?
Yes, it is.
28
So
versus
if
40.
So if 20% was to go down, Seabrook or Millstone would be responsible for buying that power at their expense from another entity to deliver in real time?
That's only for the bilateral ones.
Okay.
Meaning that we've got a deal for firm power with NextEra.
Okay.
That is backed by Seabrook versus where you have a percentage share of the output of Seabrook. That is where you see your exposure.
And what's the difference between the 40% where we would see the exposure?
I don't know.
Okay.
For 2024, your Seabrook and Millstone directly from the units, you're at about 33% there, and you have about 11 to 12% from NextEra that you would have all the time because that's firm.
Okay, so the 33%, so that's roughly what, 22% from,
27 or almost 28 is Seabrook.
okay, which is,
5.5 is Millstone.
okay. So that's your risk, is 27% of your portfolio is at risk should Seabrook come down. And if Seabrook was to come down on that day or the few days afterwards, you would be exposed.
About 5 megawatts that you have.
5 megawatts. But what would happen is the next day, we're bidding your load in the day ahead. And we would not be, and you would not be bidding, or we would not be getting the load that is bid. Seabrook would not be bidding generation for that time period. So the exposure would be just the change in the overall market price from day to day. And if we were thinking that this might be a long-term outage, what we would try to do is we would go out and contract for a fixed price for a period of time.
Okay. That makes me more comfortable.
Okay. And we ran into a very similar situation where we had a PPA agreement for a new hydro facility for a few of the members. And that was supposed to come on in January of 23 and didn't make it on. So we actually went out to the marketplace and bought power to replace that. We knew 15 days before the month that it was not going to come on. We made it, each of the entities made a decision. Do I want to replace that or do I want to just let it float with the market? But that's basically what we would do in that same situation should Seabrook come down for an unforced outage.
Right.
During a planned outage, we know that in advance. You can see where those dips are in your portfolio.
Those are always in the light load, obviously,
Yeah.
to be common sense, they're in April and October timeframes where load is the complete lightest for Hingham.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, or in general for everyone, pretty much, but that's another reason, Michael, why it's good to know where Hingham's limits are as far as what your cost of power is and what you can withstand. How long can we take prices in this range out to a limit? And when you have a good feel for where that is, then you can say, I think we're good, we can withstand this, or we should probably try to see what the market can help us with.
Sure. Then sort of long-term thinking, as Hingham considers going to a time of use metering basis, which would likely impact the load curves, how would that affect the planning for power purchase and what you folks at Energy New England are doing, particularly when we talk about a peak period and an off-peak period, whereas I think you said the peak period was 8 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night.
Mhm.
Well, we'd probably give them super peak, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think time of use. I mean, are you talking time of use residential? Are you talking time of use commercial and industrial?
Both.
Well, particularly residential, but we would do it for both.
Okay, I mean, I don't know, how people would react on time of use on a residential standpoint. Do they change the way that they use their, washer and dryer, turn on their AC and things like that? I think we would have to figure out exactly what the, elasticity of, demand is as it occurs. So there might be a period of time of learning that we would have to go through to figure out, how they react to that type of thing.
And it depends on how damaging the price is as well.
Response program.
Yeah, I mean, if they're anything like my wife, she's not going to give a damn about what the real-time price is. I mean, price. If she's hot, she's going to want to turn that AC on. If she's cold, she's going to turn that heat on. So
you sign up to allow us or HMLP to turn that air conditioning down, and that's a different type of scenario.
Yeah,
the folks who did our rate study said that research shows that yes, some people do change their behavior in response to the price signals. So I think what we would expect to do is run a pilot program. But that would also probably be voluntary, so that would skew your results as well.
You'd need, it would depend a lot on the marketing and how damaging you make that price, and give them pointers of when to charge that, let that AC run during those off-peak hours, and then shut it off right before that peak, so that they've cooled the house down when it's low price and all those sorts of things. But we would definitely, it would be a learning curve to see that data and then get a feel for it.
And basically what you'd do is you would expect it would flatten out your load curve, right? So that you are no longer, seeing, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. a big jump in load because everyone comes home, turns on their AC. Typically they've have their AC on from noon to 4 and then they turn it off or turn it down during those peak hours. And so you have leveling, which is probably better from our perspective, from the standpoint of contracting. Because when we buy blocks of power, we're buying a flat block that runs, 1 megawatt across those 16 hours. So.
Well, that would be the goal. I mean, we imagine that there's savings for the ratepayers overall in such a system. So, but figuring out how to get the details right is the big challenge.
Right. I mean, the goal is, for me, it's very simple. We buy power And if we can not use it at the time when LMPs are the highest by influencing people's behavior within the town of Hingham, we can sell that power back at a higher price and therefore keep our rates lower.
Sounds great. Let's do that someday. Okay, anything else, Lori, that you'd like to tell us?
Good, but please reach out if you have, detailed questions about the ANI. I'm happy to break it into more detailed analysis for you if you
Okay.
should need it.
So I have an issue that we've been talked a little bit, you and me and Brianna, about what is the best way to represent our power portfolio to the public, because of the questions that I frequently get. People will ask me, how much of our portfolio is non-carbon emitting? And I usually say, well, how much time do you have? Because it's hard to take the complexities and turn it into something that is easily graspable. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to, have a conversation with you offline to kind of hammer
Sure.
that out and see
Yeah,
if we can
that's
make a better
a fairly
presentation on our
simple.
website.
It's a very simple request, Laura.
Absolutely.
That's not very hard for us to do based on what your portfolio is. I mean, if you flip to the next slide, I mean, you can see, if I take a look at your portfolio for 2024, you're probably about 77% at this point, non-carbon or non-emitting, according to the greenhouse gas emission standards. And that includes nuclear, hydro, wind, and solar. Now, it only means that you're non-emitting is if you retire those RECs.
Which
So right now, we're not retiring the RECs, such that your non-emitting is probably closer to about 35%.
Well,
because-
our technically renewable content
Right.
is, but to me, that's a different, it's a long, this is why I'd ask people how much time they have before we
Right. And
discuss it.
but
Finding a way to present that to the public that is both that is clear and straightforward and accurate, but not too confusing is
Okay.
a challenge.
I mean, the key thing from this chart is that if I look at the greenhouse gas emission standards, and this is all based on flat load, which we know is not going to be true. The anticipation is that load, over the next 10 years should grow somewhere in the about 20% due to electrification of transportation, as well as electrification of heating that occurs. But even if that's the case, Hingham is in excellent shape through the mid 2030s based on your current portfolio. That does not include any of those other projects we talked about being included in here, which includes the Granite, which you would get a piece of because of the Chariot Solar. Any sort of blend and extends for the Cabot Turner. That's not included. So those all will push you further out on the curve. And if we were able to get Dominion to the table or some other nuclear asset, again, pushes you further out, and so that you're in a better shape as we head into 2040. And by that time, Tyler will be around, and that's about it. Dealing with this.
Yeah, so I imagine we can't really make any projections beyond looking at what's kind of currently on the table.
Right.
Who knows what might be
Yeah,
coming
I
down.
mean,
the pipe in
who
2030s.
knows, whether or not the requirements will change come 2040. People might come to the realization that we can't get to 100% non-emitting because the cost of being 100% non-emitting would drive everyone to the poorhouse or drive businesses out of New England into other states that are not trying to hit these thresholds. So we probably will come to a point where, or if there's some sort of cosmic change in how we can produce non-emitting generation, there has to be some sort of compromise as we get closer past 2040. The last slide really just kind of goes through you typically get 3 different RECs from your generation. You get Class 1 RECs, which are considered your new renewables, stuff that has been installed post, I would say, 1998. And it includes a lot of different things. Some things which you might not even be aware of, like landfill gas or low emission biomass, all qualify as Class 1 RECs. Right now for 24 in Massachusetts, the IOUs and the energy supply companies have to meet about 24% of their retail sales with Class 1 RECs. And right now, the price for these Class 1 RECs is, in the mid $39 price range. And that is up against a alternative compliance payment cap in Massachusetts and Connecticut of $40. So what that tells me is that there's a pretty good balance between supply and demand at this point, such that, actually that we're not seeing prices down at the $20 that we saw roughly about 5 years ago. Second type of classification is main Class 2s. Can be renewable or an efficient resource. What I mean by that, there's some coal plants that qualify as main Class 2 and oil plants that qualify as main Class 2s, and biomass, because they have done some energy efficiency upgrades to those facilities. Right now, on a hydroelectric side, the resource must be less than 50 megawatts in size. Prices right now are between $2.50 and $3 per REC. As I was telling you before, there's a legislative price cap of $10, but the main PUC has capped it at $5. So they actually went below what the legislative cap is, because they felt that it was detrimental to Maine residents to have a higher price for their RECs, which represent, I think, about 30% of their portfolio has to come from Maine Class 2 RECs. The last piece is you get from your entitlements in both Millstone and Seabrook, a small portion of it comes with Mass Clean Energy Standard expansion. It covers the assets that fall underneath this REC are large hydroelectric generators outside of New England that are importing power into New England, as well as Millstone and Seabrook. Any large asset can only qualify for about 2.5 million RECs per facility. If you take a look at Seabrook, which is about 1,000 megawatts, it produces roughly about 8.7 million megawatt hours. So roughly 27% of its RECs qualify for this program. And right now, again, there's a tight balance, and current prices are somewhere around $8.75 to $9.25 per REC, and the alternative compliance payment is $10. And in Massachusetts, up until I think it's this year, it was 20% of your overall portfolio had to be met with the Mass CESEs. Now it's more of a calculation, which I can't figure out how they come up with those numbers. And that's all we have on the REC side of things.
Okay, thanks. Any comments or questions from the board or staff on this bit? Any comments or questions from members of the public for the presenters? Okay, well, I can't thank you enough for this. This was extremely informative. I learned a lot, and I may be following up with a couple of questions after I've looked over it again. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. And
Not a problem, Laura.
I'm sure we'll be
Good seeing you
talking
guys
again soon.
again. It's been a while.
Yep. Thanks for coming
Thank you.
back. Okay,
Thanks.
And thank you, Laurie.
so long.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you both.
Bye now.
Okay, so we have a couple more items on the agenda. We have to approve some meeting minutes. Is everybody prepared to approve meeting minutes for June 11th?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of June 11th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, Tyler,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Laura, aye. Thanks very much. And once again, a tremendous set of minutes. I feel like, I mean, it's a complicated subject, our financials, and I feel like somebody who really wanted to know more about it could take the financials that are on our website, put it right next to these minutes and really get a grip on it. So I want to thank you all very much for the great set of minutes.
Absolutely.
Okay, the financials, Tom?
Yeah, let me share the screen. Oh, I can't find them on my screen here.
I always try to close everything before I get into the situations.
Yeah, I opened it. I have them. Oh, here, I'm sorry. Here they are. Let me be a little bigger.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, so kilowatt sales were obviously higher. June was warm. Revenue slightly higher than the last couple of years. Expenses, again, 80% of our expenses are related to our power costs, so they're higher. Our net income was $318,000 for the month. That net income included the sale of RECs. We're recognizing the sale of RECs when they happen now, so that would be included in this net income for the month. We did lower the PCA for June, so I think the 318 is reflective of the $200,000 in the sale of the RECs.
Mhm.
Year to date, we continue to be fairly high, 2.2 million year to date for the end of June. So June continues to look at our net income to kind of see whether we need to adjust our PCA again, so we come in under that 8% return that we need to be with the DPU. So we may be lowering it again. We're kind of waiting to see what July and possibly August comes in at, but at least July.
Okay. Any comments or questions from the board, the staff, or the public?
What was the period for the RECs, Tom?
That would have been the third quarter, third quarter. That'd be the last quarter of 23. Right,
Okay.
Joan?
Joan is waving her hand.
Yeah, actually, that I think Tom's confusing something there. The rec revenue that we have is because we spent the money, the green fund money. When we do that, we have to recognize it as revenue.
Oh, okay.
So we spent 250,000 that we brought into income for June.
So we are going to recognize the rec revenue too, right?
Yep, but we don't have that
forward.
yet for the current year.
All right. So the 23, because that was 23, the rec revenue that we received in June, that was
Yep, there's the fourth quarter for 2023, correct?
okay. I apologize. I was thinking it was the rec revenue for selling the recs, but that was the solar.
No worries.
Mhm. Okay, any other questions or comments? Thanks very much. And we're up to updates.
All right,
Transmission project.
transmission project.
Oh, maybe we can unshare.
Oh, shoot.
So we can see each other.
The transmission project, we continue to plug away on that. We submitted our filing to Eversource. Eversource has 60 days to review the filing and make comment before we can file with the siting board. So we should have that back from them at the end of August. And our plan is to file early September with the siting board. So that's where
Okay.
we are with that.
So I think we were just gonna,
Yeah, we were gonna skip the HMLP
there's
solar.
no
That's
news on
October,
the
right?
light plant solar.
I was gonna remove that. I apologize. Municipal solar, no, or if you want to give the update or.
Yeah, so there actually some update from the solar task force. We had a meeting with Joe Fisher from the select board and Art Robert from the town administrator's office. And they have expressed the willingness and the interest of the select board to proceed with doing some projects on municipal buildings that would be owned by the town. So that from our study on the task force, that looks like the most advantageous to the residents. Whether you look at them as ratepayers or as taxpayers, the residents will save more if the town owns them. And so that would involve possibly taking some projects to town meeting in the spring for bonding. And I'm personally looking forward to that, of course, because it means taking a project to town meeting that will pay for itself and generate revenue, which how often do you get to do that at town meeting? Almost never. So and the select board has a very high priority on finding revenue generating projects to alleviate the tax burden. And so this fits right into that. So we're discussing what the projects will be, and we're going to be working on developing an RFP for some set of town buildings in conjunction with the town. And then also the town has for some time been talking about doing a facility study on all the buildings to determine what their state is, and they want to go ahead and do that and determine what the state of the roofs are, and then come up with a multi-year plan for considering solar arrays on town buildings based on the age and the condition of the roof and when they get repaired and so forth. So this is very exciting. It's the it's the most positive report that I've been able to make for some time. So we will keep you posted, but we're pretty excited about it.
All right, capital projects, we're working on Circuit 9. We'll have that done by the end of the year. We just pulled in the first wire run along Main Street from Central down to towards the high school, the fire station. So we'll continue to work on that for probably a good part of the rest of the year. The other big project we had was the transmission line project, where we're replacing the insulators. We finally have all the materials for that project, but now we're working with the T, and the T has to approve our plan. So we submitted the paperwork for that, but unfortunately they have, I think it's 90 days to approve the plan and come back with the conditions. So we cannot go out to bid for that project until we have those conditions. And obviously we can't take the lines out in our peak months in winter months. So the window for, we had hoped to do that in October, November, that we're not going to make that window. So we're going to have to push that till April, March, April of next year to get that work done. And then our demand response program, we've started rolling out the program. We've had some customers that don't qualify for the program. because of, car charges, don't qualify or whatever. But overall, and it was really just the beginning to roll that out, and do the advertising, but we do have some customers that have enrolled and, are working with, Next Zero to, be part of that program, just a count.
Well, having been out of,
We have about 15 customers that
Oh,
have
good.
signed up so far.
that's a good start for the first month. Having been out of town for almost all of July, I was just so excited to come home and open my light bill and discover that I could sign up for the demand response program. So we've been thinking about this and for a while. So thank you, Tom, for pushing this forward and moving us into this era. And I know it's going to take us a while to really spin up and figure out the best way to reach people and what's to how to convey what the advantages are for the ratepayers, but I'm really excited to get started.
As the program grows, there'll be more appliances and things that will become available, for the customers. So
Great. Okay, that is the end of our list of updates. Unless anyone has any further questions or comments, anyone, staff, board, or public? If not, I just want to talk briefly about agendas for the next couple of meetings. Tyler, would you be prepared to help us have a conversation about the pilot program at our next meeting in September?
Yeah, I can definitely help. I can speak to, the history and the current landscape, if
So
that's
I
what we're
think
talking about.
I think I sent you the spreadsheet that study that some folks did to collect all the MLP's latest programs. So maybe you can help us think that they were bewilderingly different one from another. So
They were, yeah, and that's what I mean by the current landscape.
yeah, that would be helpful. Okay, great. And then the other thing we had hanging from the previous meeting was to be coming up with the staff was going to come up with a list of questions that we might address in the proposed study on, our power of supply going forward into the future. So maybe we should schedule that. Should we schedule that for an October meeting, Tom? Does that make sense?
we can, yep, we can do that.
Okay.
I know Brianna has been working on that.
Okay. Yeah, I prefer not to schedule more than one large discussion per meeting so that we can be sure to get done in a reasonable period of time. But if that sounds good to everybody, that's what we can do for the next couple of meetings then.
Were we going to have E&E come and talk to us about the rebate program?
You wanted, was it a Bode you wanted, right, to come in and talk?
Oh, as a bone.
Yeah, we can do that. Just tell me when you want to do that. They're willing to come on.
Maybe we could do that in October as well. Is that okay with everybody? Okay.
Okay, I'll have them for October.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for your time.
I have one request. I think Laura and Tyler, I need to get the DPU report signed.
I will do that tomorrow.
And Tyler, if it's easier for you, I can drop it off at your house and have you give it to you to sign, and then just tell me when it's done and I can pick it up. Or one of the guys, have someone.
I can swing by. If I didn't have that on my agenda, I need to take care of, so that's my oversight, so sorry.
No, that's all right. It's right at the front counter, so if you can just let me know when you're coming by.
Okay.
I'll do that tomorrow.
Okay.
Thanks very much, everybody. Can we have a motion to adjourn, please?
Yeah, one more.
Oh,
One more.
sorry. Oh,
I'm sorry. Are we going to continue with the meetings at 4:30? Does that work best for everyone, or?
Tyler, what's your situation now? Tell us.
I can no longer do the morning meetings.
Okay,
But I am comfortable finding some afternoons. The question is if that works for the light plant and the board. And that's why we scheduled this one.
Yep.
I may be able to have different times in the afternoon, but yeah, the morning meetings, I just can't unfortunately do anymore after changing jobs.
do we want to schedule it the September meeting for 4:30 again? It would be,
So one question I have is that, would Brianna be available for meetings at 4:30? I know that she ends her workday at 4.
yeah, I mean, her day ends at 4:30, but I can have her stay and get on.
Let's try 4 o'clock start.
And perhaps we can schedule our agendas. If there's things we need Brianna for, we can put them right up front.
Okay, so that'd be September 10th would be the next meeting.
Okay, September 10th at 4 p.m. Okay, excellent. Are we now ready to entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, Mike,
Aye.
Tyler,
Aye.
Laura, aye. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.